Adaptation physiology is a branch of physiology that studies how organisms adapt to environmental changes to maintain homeostasis. This adaptation includes changes at the molecular, cellular, tissue, organ, and body system levels. Adaptation physiology is essential for survival, especially when organisms face challenges such as changes in temperature, oxygen pressure, water levels, or exposure to toxic substances. 1. Definition of adaptation. Adaptation is the ability of organisms to adapt to environmental changes through biological mechanisms. Acute adaptation, a rapid and temporary response to sudden changes. Chronic adaptation, a long-term response, often involving permanent structural or functional changes. 2. Types of adaptation based on mechanism. A. Molecular adaptation, changes in gene or protein expression to deal with the environment. Example: hemoglobin production is higher in environments with low oxygen levels, hypoxia. Activation of stress genes, heat shock proteins, at high temperatures. B. Cellular adaptation, changes in cell structure or function. Example: muscle cell hypertrophy due to physical exercise. Apoptosis, programmed cell death, to eliminate damaged cells. C. Physiological adaptation, adjustment of organ or body system function. Example: increased heart rate and lung ventilation during exercise. Adjustment of osmoregulation in animals living in hypertonic environments. D. Morphological adaptation, changes in body structure to face environmental challenges. Example: thick layers of fat in polar mammals to reduce heat loss. Small leaves in desert plants to reduce evaporation. E. Behavioral adaptation, changes in the way organisms behave to avoid adverse conditions. Example: bird migration to warm areas during winter. Seeking shelter to avoid extreme heat. 3. Adaptation mechanisms to environmental factors. A. Temperature, low temperature, vasoconstriction to reduce heat loss. Increased basal metabolism to produce heat, thermogenesis. High temperature, vasodilation to increase heat dissipation. Sweating to cool the body through evaporation. B. Hypoxia, lack of oxygen, acute response, increased respiratory rate, hyperventilation. Increased heart rate to accelerate oxygen distribution. Chronic response. Production of erythropoietin by the kidneys to increase red blood cell production. Increased tissue capillarization to improve oxygen diffusion. C. Osmoregulation in hypertonic environment. Water retention by the kidneys through antidiuretic hormone, ADH. Excretion of salt ions through excretory glands. In hypotonic environment, excretion of more urine to remove excess water. D. Physical stress, acute response, Activation of the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. Release of stress hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol. Chronic response. Tissue adaptations such as muscle hypertrophy. Decreased stress response after repeated exposure. UV radiation increased melanin production to protect the skin from DNA damage. Activation of DNA repair mechanisms such as excision repair. 4. Adaptation in body systems. Respiratory system increased lung volume in individuals living at high altitudes. Increased oxygen diffusion in the alveoli through increased hemoglobin levels. B. Cardiovascular system increased tissue capillarization to improve oxygen and nutrient distribution. Adjustment of blood pressure to cope with gravity or physical activity. C. Digestive system adaptation of gut microflora to digest certain types of food. Enzymatic changes to utilize different energy sources. D. Immune system immunological adaptation to pathogens through immune memory. Increased antibody production after vaccination or infection. 5. Specific examples of physiological adaptation in humans. Adaptation in athletes increased blood volume and cardiac efficiency. Increased mitochondrial density in muscles for aerobic metabolism. B. Adaptation in Highlanders increased hematocrit to increase oxygen carrying capacity. Changes in pulmonary ventilation for efficient oxygen uptake. C. Adaptation in mine workers adjustment of body metabolism to deal with low oxygen levels and high temperatures. 6. Disorders in adaptation mechanisms if the adaptation mechanism fails. Disorders such as heat stroke, the body's inability to regulate temperature in extreme heat conditions. Mountain sickness, the body's inability to adapt to hypoxia at high altitudes. Dehydration, fluid imbalance due to loss of too much water and electrolytes. 7. Applications of adaptation physiology. Medicine and rehabilitation exercise programs for patients with heart or lung disorders. Understanding adaptation to the environment helps in hypoxia or hyperthermia therapy. B. Environmental and ecological research study of animal and plant adaptation to climate change. Microbial adaptation in dealing with extreme environments. C. Sports and fitness development of training programs tailored to the individual's adaptive capacity. Conclusion: the physiology of adaptation is key to understanding how organisms survive changing conditions. These adaptations not only ensure survival, but also provide insights into improving human health, addressing environmental challenges, and enhancing quality of life.